An apartment complex has 250 apartments to rent. If they rent X apartments, then their monthly profit in dollars, so we have 2 units here, X is representing the number of apartments, and their profit is in just regular dollars. It's given by this capital P of X. How many apartments should they rent in order to maximize their profit, and what is their maximum profit going to be? So we are going to figure out our objective is this function right here. This is what we want to maximize. There's the function we're going to take the derivative of and set equal to 0. And then we also need to figure out our implied domain, or our interval of interest. So our interval of interest is going to be all about the X values. It's the least number of apartments they could rent to the most number of apartments they could rent. So the least they could rent is 0, not renting out any. And the most that they could rent, they could fit up to 250 apartments in their complex that could be rented out. So there's our interval of interest, and there's our objective function, and now we are ready to do our 2 steps. So our first step is to find the critical numbers. So I'm going to take the derivative of capital P, so it'll be capital P prime of X. Derivative of negative 8x squared is going to be negative 16x. Derivative of 3200x is going to be 3200. And derivative of negative 80,000 is just going to be 0. So we're going to take this derivative and set it equal to 0, and we're going to solve for x. So I don't have an x squared, I just have a linear function, this mx plus b, so I just need to solve it like a linear function. So first thing I'm going to do is subtract the 3200 from both sides. Trying to isolate the x by itself, so we subtract 3200, so we get negative 16x equals negative 3200, and then we need to divide both sides by negative 16 to get that x by itself. So x is going to be negative 3200 divided by negative 16, which is a positive 200, and remember x represents apartments. So our second step is to test our endpoints and compare our critical number as long as it's in between. And 200 is in between 0 and 250, so we do have to test it. So my second step is to plug in P of 0, my lower bound, P of 250, my upper endpoint, and P of 200, the critical number that ends up being in between. So if we plug in P of 0, we're looking for Y values here. So we're going to plug into the original. If they rent out 0 apartments and they own this apartment complex, their profit is negative 80,000, which seems right because profit comes from revenue, how much money you make in, minus the cost it takes to own the apartments. So if they have no revenue from renting 0 apartments, then they're going to be out $80,000 every month if they don't rent out any apartments for this apartment complex that they're paying for. If we plug in P of 200 into the original function here, negative 8 times 200 squared plus 3200 times 200 minus 80,000, you should get 240,000. And this is dollars, so that month they make $240,000 versus if they rent 0, they're out $80,000. So then we would plug 250 into the original to see if renting out every single possible apartment they could would make them more money. So it seems like it probably would, but when you plug in 250, you get $220,000. So just because they rent out more apartments doesn't mean they make more profit. So they would have more revenue, which is how much money you're taking in, but your profit is your revenue minus the cost. So there must be some additional cost that's making this so it's really not worth it. Maybe it puts them in a different tax bracket, so they have way more costs associated to subtract from their bigger revenue. So our answer to this is that they should rent $200 apartments for an absolute max profit of $240,000. So they should rent 200 apartments for an absolute max profit of $240,000. This one here is going to give us our absolute max.